All right, and we are live. Welcome everyone to AI Office Hours.
Yay, welcome everybody.
Ooh. Yes, there we are. Hello.
Good to see everybody.
Welcome.
Hish,
Good to see you, Dave.
Hey,
Hish,
Rob.
welcome. Yeah. Today's guest is Hish. Ismail, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's
awesome.
good.
Awesome. From an asset manager from Oxford Properties, joining us today to be on the show and chat with me and Dave. We met at ICSC a couple weeks back, which was a great show, and we talked about that a little bit the week before last. Let me get rid of some of this music, guys.
Yeah, not a problem. We get that Wayne's World track going.
Yeah.
Office hours, party time. Yeah, I think coming out of ICSC, Hish was like, I was saying to Hish, because we met up afterwards, and sort of was one of the more engaging conversations about AI that we had with one of the professionals in the commercial real estate field, and someone that's clearly engaged in where property technology is going and has thoughts about how to leverage it internally. And and I think a lot of organizations are just on the cusp of sort of doing operational audits and starting to think about these things. But it's great to pick Hish's brain and get some of his ideas about sort of what he's using right now, and sort of what, in a dream world, what he could be using in the future if we, built some cool tools that leveraged AI. So Hish, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to discussing AI today with you, man.
Yeah, Rob, Dave, thanks for having me on the show. Super excited. Like Rob mentioned, I'm an asset manager at Oxford Properties, and super keen to chat about AI and how that's impacting the commercial real estate space. And just as kind of a disclaimer, everything that I share today on my end is my own personal opinion and not representation of Oxford Properties.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course.
Yeah, we figured this is just a chat between Hish, Dave, and Rob about AI and commercial real estate.
Yeah, but it's important dealing with sort of enterprise level business. We have to take care of all those compliance things when we sit down and have these sort of like fly on the wall conversations and just have like, very casual conversations about things. But we want to be mindful of all the regulatory stuff. So that having been said, let's dive in. I know, Rob, you have sort of prepared a little bit of a framework for today's show, but usually we abandon that and just sort of like end up talking randomly. but it's good to have a plan written out regardless. Yeah, it's sort of like it's the birthing plan of podcasts. Right.
But if we need to veer off, I'm not a stickler for being on the stuff. But I did have a question. I guess my first question for Hish was, in a very I said it in one line. It could be more than one line. But how do you describe your role at Oxford today? Like help people understand what asset management is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I kind of think about asset management in the commercial real estate space is really we're responsible for maximizing the value of properties. And we do that primarily through collaborating with kind of our great teams who manage different parts of the business. And it's really about strategizing and executing on value creation projects. So that could be things like renovations or net new projects or kind of anything that we kind of can do to the property that adds value.
Okay, very cool.
Fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah. And what's like one of the problems that you're facing or focusing on solving this quarter or next year as we're close to the end of the year?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It feels like there's tons of problems that we're trying to solve. I think one that's kind of always in the background is kind of thinking about the space that we have in the property and thinking about, are we using it in the highest and best way? I can't really dive into many specifics of this, but you can imagine that properties, we have space that's vacant or occupied, or we even thinking about creating more space. And so there's this evolution of conversations that we have internally with different teams about which kind of path makes sense to add value to the property.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I imagine there's so many lenses that gets put under with regards to like social utility and the amount of traffic that certain businesses generate that complement other businesses, and trying to create sort of like an exponential value for the businesses that are all there in a certain configuration. And yeah, I think there's so many different lenses to put that under. And I think more important than ever is that with an excess of space, sometimes to try to reimagine how to create traffic with different community sort of like involvement, and how to, work with different municipalities and stuff to bring extra value to the site. Like I know, some properties have brought police stations in on site, for a multiple of reasons. It strengthens their security presence at the mall, but it also makes it much more family friendly, and it allows people to have a higher trust in the space. So I think like that's so interesting to know that, like, there's probably a million angles to look at that from, and imagine new avenues on how to leverage better utility, like total utility within a real estate space. So yeah, it's very cool, Hish. I think that's very fun field to be involved in.
Yeah, and I think just to build on what you're saying, just like as a individual who, in real estate, you really have kind of multiple customers. And when I think about owner operators, you have your tenants who occupy the space. They're one set of customers, but also the general public in the community is another customer. So it's really about creating space that serves multiple different customers.
Yeah, that's definitely got to be a challenge to balance that, because it's like a B2B, B2C type of challenge where, and I have some experience working with shopping centers. There's the tenants that you're always trying to please and work with, and then customers we want to have in the space and coming to the space, spending more time, obviously buying more, etc., stuff like that. When you talked about looking at the value of the property and trying to come up with value, thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I wonder if you ever use AI for that, to like analyze a space or analyze a property and say, hey, how are some ways we can improve the value? Have you done any of that? Does you or your team explore that? Or I know you can't talk about you there, but I don't know, just in general, or have you heard anything or seen any of that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it in the market. I've seen folks who use kind of predictive analytics to take historical data and project it forward, and they use those data points to make decisions about specific changes they want to make within a shopping center or a property. So it's definitely happening. I think it's kind of in certain areas of the business, but not kind of permeated throughout the whole kind of business and organization.
Yeah.
Well, it's we're used to it because we've been in it for the last little bit, but it's still new to a lot of places. Now I'm starting to see that enterprise level bit getting picked up, and more companies talking about how do we implement AI, how do we integrate this into our business in the different areas. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of traditional sort of gunslingers in that asset management field that are like sort of still doing things the old school way. And like, statistically speaking, they were saying that 60% of people in commercial real estate aren't using any tools at all, which I found to be interesting. So there's a lot of space for people to start adopting even the most basic workflow tooling, to try to become a little bit more powerful. But there's people out there also leveraging all of the tools and really investing in them, and some of them are very expensive solutions, but agencies see value in the information that they give people, and to make informed decisions, right? Which, subscription fees for some of these things are very minute compared to the size of some of these deals. And, the assets under management in some of these companies are north of like $50 billion. So now you're talking about like really, it's an informed decision platform that's sort of necessary to be compliant, I think, at that enterprise level of management, especially when you have like shareholders involved, because now you're like, well, we have to be doing our due diligence. Part of that due diligence now is using AI, right? So, I think the conversation's starting to change internally in a lot of places for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard any kind of pushback on using AI in your field or use like amongst the teams? Is there any resistance, or is it more curiosity or uncertainty, or is it just outright no?
I think when I've kind of talked to folks kind of in a community, there's always concerns about privacy and proprietary data and information. So I think once that has kind of been largely addressed, I think people are very curious and they often use it and experiment with it. And I think kind of what I'm seeing is that people are using it in a lot of different ways. Some of it is very specific to, I guess, commercial real estate use cases, but also using it in very general ways to just help them be more productive.
Yeah, us too. I find with some of the clients that I work with, that's where they're using it. But those are the same concerns that their senior, the upper management have, is privacy. Making sure they're not uploading any proprietary information or sales data and things like that. So I think at some point I have to believe in, Dave, maybe you can talk about this, is like when it comes to privacy and governance, I imagine in a perfect world, was that like a company like or Oxford may have their own AI.
That's what I was going to say. Data. Yeah, that's precisely it. Is companies now and organizations are starting to set up their own language models that are very specific to what they're doing and powerful in what they need to do. So if you're ingesting tons of data and want to have a huge snapshot of all of that, you can use like really large token models, like 5 and 10 million token llama models. And if you're doing stuff that's in the law hemisphere, there's like legal LLMs. And so the best practice would be to deploy these locally or on a cloud that's compliant with the standards of that particular industry, and run a closed language model that's only accessible to your internal staff through a login gateway. So you can have your own deployments and have your own RAG system with a whole database of your own information that references that to give you informed decisions and set up guardrails. And I think that's the future of just like people using it at the most basic level within organizations that have that privacy concern, because that's a real concern. If you're putting in sensitive information, or you don't want to be training the model sort of like so that your competitors are benefiting from like all of your data that you're like ingesting into the system. So you got to start thinking about internalizing some of those systems, especially for compliance. Sometimes, like in the law industry, it's like, or the health industry, you have all these compliance, like HIPAA compliance and all this stuff. So you can't just be pumping, names and health card numbers and stuff into outer space. You have to have it in a secure environment, right? So, yeah. I think. No, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say, under lock and key, like it's got to be locked down so that things don't get out anywhere out into the public. And I think that's the big concern that a lot of these companies have.
Yeah.
So I had a couple questions that I kind of sent to you, and we were looking at. What data do you trust for decisions today, and what's missing? That's kind of a loaded question, but I thought, you obviously see a lot of data from these properties from a number of different places.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. What data do I trust? I think the simple answer is none.
Okay.
I think in larger scale kind of organizations, there's a lot of data, and the complexity of where this data is housed and how it's used translates into it being very fragmented and often kind of stale after a while. So when looking at data, you always have to be kind of skeptical about where it's coming from, how it was inputted, and the intent of the use. In terms of what's missing, that's also really hard to answer because it's a really complex and multidisciplinary challenge in a way. Like, we're getting all this data from all different sources for different things. I think in kind of my role, what would be the ideal outcome would be to be able to kind of query myself a data set and have it clean, structured, and accurate. So depending on what type of analysis or decision we're trying to make, being able to query exactly the data set I want and have confidence that that data is accurate and structured and clean would be super helpful.
Right. So, but when you're getting the data, I think you alluded to it earlier, it may not be clean, it may not be structured properly. So does that have to happen before it gets to you, or from those raw data places, or are you getting it in a different way? I'm not sure if I'm articulating myself right.
There's some like standard in the organizations I've worked with and kind of the larger institutional ones, they'll have kind of their in-house proprietary systems that are linked up to maybe other types of industry standard software. And these proprietary systems will often pump out reports or data sets for a specific use. And often I found myself in the past and in other organizations where I've had to take those data sets and do some transformations to it to kind of get the specific data I need to do the analysis and kind of make informed decisions. So I think that's kind of a theme that I've seen as I've moved through different organizations.
And is that data that's coming through an API, or are you guys taking data dump, like sort of exports and piping it in like in a routine or a manual import procedure, or how does that look on that side, Hish?
I think it kind of depends on what data it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times there are individuals who are responsible for taking data, manually inputting it into a system, and then that gets kind of centralized and rolled up.
Okay.
And then other users can kind of query and pull that data.
Yeah.
That's typically what I've seen.
Because what we're seeing on that side sort of is if we have a data warehouse or a data lake where there's an API, we can actually create MCPs now that take those data channels and make them relatable for an agent. So for an agent to actually make sense of those data mappings can happen almost instantaneously, and you can give it a little bit of, you zhuzh it a little bit afterwards and give it a little bit of extra instructions, right? But I think that's sort of where we're seeing like these massive like data projects sort of headed, is like connections to, siloed data within a data warehouse, but then it allows you to connect to multiple channels of data in that data lake and make powerful sort of like relationships between them. So this stuff is early days, obviously, but it's also, I was saying, with these 10 million context llama models that are out, you can take these gigantic snapshots of all of the data, which seems ridiculous, but you might find in some of those bigger snapshots that you're taking relationships between data that you never knew existed, and things that are moving the needle in your data set that you might not have considered before. So it's neat because like human gut check sort of decision making is like an awesome thing. And it's like, I think people that are very in tune with the market and like have been in it for a while and just know how to make great decisions, that's amazing. But like AI is able to just ingest so much more data and make cool insights from it. So I'm kind of excited to see, the near future of some of the data analysis that's going to take place with all this tooling,
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So,
are you guys using any AI right now to look at data? Is that something that's being considered or talked about at least, or do you know of anybody that's jumped in and they're using it in that sense?
I think kind of generally what I've seen is, larger institutions rely on technology partners, and some of these technology partners will roll out some of these AI features. And so, for example, like in my personal computer, I'll have like Copilot that's been rolled out. I have no choice; it's kind of just there. So I think as technology partners kind of offer these features and applications to users, the users will naturally just use them. And there's obviously some guardrails about like what you can do with these kind of features and applications. And it's kind of left up to the user to figure out what they want to do with it. So I think I talked about this earlier, but I've seen people use kind of AI stuff on more workflow, personal productivity, and then some on kind of more technical analysis.
Yeah, I think you touch on like some important points there about sort of like agnostic AI usage within the workplace rather than being married to an enterprise solution that's sort of like vertically implemented within the organization, and like sort of like you have to stick to this set of products because at any given moment that might not be the most powerful product for what you're trying to achieve. So I think it's just about having like an agnostic first AI model within the organization where you're fluid, and unless you've got some partnership agreement or something, which like, you know, but I mean, like for the average organization, I think you should be very sort of fluid in the way that you're adopting AI, and just make sure that you train everyone on what not to do. Like, don't put in like social insurance numbers into like, you know, like these are the like, you know, but I mean, like, these are the things that like are silly, but like coming from an IT sort of like background that's dealt with a lot of the silly stories, I can tell you that one person in the organization is going to be doing that stuff and not knowing that it was bad, even though, you know, so you got to really drill all that stuff in. But I think leaving it open so that people not only aren't siloed into one product suite, but just so that they feel open to explore tools and like feel free to like go and check what's out there and like experiment and be creative, because there's new stuff coming out every week. And there's people that know so much stuff that I don't know. Even as a guy that's like knee deep in AI all the time, like I'm always getting someone coming up to me, showing me something cool that I've not seen, right? And that's the beauty of AI right now, is moving so fast, and it's fueled by excitement, and it's like this open source culture where we're all just like pushing that rock piece by piece up the hill, and we don't know where we're going. And yeah, it's fun.
I think something that I'm finding very interesting is, you know, there are these general models that are being pushed out and people are using them in very general ways. And I think kind of the opportunity there is how you can start to take these general models and specialize them and fine tune them towards a very specific use case. And I think that's where kind of the real value is going to be unlocked.
Yeah. I agree. And there's so much in the open space model market where people are starting to do that. And I'm working with a model right now that's specifically trained on like UK and Australian and Canadian law. And it's like Mistral sort of 7 billion parameter model, but then it's been retrained on all this like legal sort of stuff, right? So it's kind of cool that you have these niche market open source models that have been sort of like ripped apart and retrained for that very specific purpose. So yeah, I think there's just so much going on out there right now, and it's hard to keep up with, but it's cool to see how some of this might tie into commercial real estate and all the stuff that we're sort of dealing with these days.
Yeah. Have you seen any cool commercial real estate AI tools that have come across your desk, or anybody that's shared with you, like doing something that you're like, oh, that's very cool, or if there was something that you wish it would do?
I mean, I've seen a bunch of cool stuff in our organization that's happening.
Yeah.
Some of it is a bit more general
in
terms of like managing back-end processes of the business. But I think what I'm finding to be more interesting is how people are using it to augment analysis that they're already doing. So how can I explain this in an interesting way? So I can talk about how I've used it, for example, with like lease analysis. So in shopping centers, you have hundreds of tenants, which translates into hundreds of leases. And when you think about amendments to those leases, you start to multiply that by a factor of 2 to 3. So now you have all this documentation around specificities of a lease. And if you're doing a value add project that involves, let's say, maybe like 5 tenants, having to go and read, say, 5 to 50 leases to understand what the situation is with all those specific tenants can take a lot of time. So how I've used it, one use case is I've taken all that documentation, put it into Copilot, and used it as kind of a thought partner to flush out kind of opportunities and risk and constraints. So that has accelerated my ability to do analysis and do my due diligence.
That's cool.
Very cool. That is
very cool. Yeah, no, I'm seeing like sort of like that same pattern where people are taking those like project modes within the language models and giving some files and giving some project structure to what you want in the output, and they're getting very good results. And that's sort of like the first proof of concept stage to building solutions too that are more automated and like have user logins and become system applications, is sort of like those groundwork pieces that are like you're using for the specific operational component can all be like pieces that are like built and washed out and become a little bit more reliable on the output side and stuff. But it's like, that's the beginning of all AI apps essentially.
Yeah.
Right on. Have you seen, like, is there a most overrated AI use case that you've come across, or is something that anybody's always like is showing as an example that you're kind of like, yeah, I've seen it?
I don't know if anything's really overrated, to be honest, in the commercial real estate space. I think I'm finding out new ways that people are using it, and I don't really think there's any kind of like singular hype thing that it's being used for. I think it's all valuable, and to me, it's like the more people that are using the technology in different ways is just better. So
yeah, I'm on the same team there. Yeah, just like the more you use it, the better you get. The more weird stuff you find and ways to use it, and yeah, it's true.
Yeah, because I find everybody comes from their own angle, right? Like when I work with marketing people or specialty leasing people, they're dealing with things that I don't even think about or I don't even know. Yeah. And they'll come up and they'll say, oh, I did this with it. And I'll be like, that's really cool. That's really cool that you used it for that. Yeah. So that I think it is. I agree with you. It's like everybody's got to use it for their stuff because they know how best to what problems it can solve for them, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. I think you just have to like go in with it's almost like you have to go in with a beginner mindset and like not to be too focused on outcomes and just be like, is this what I want? And then you slowly just use it a bit more and kind of tweak. And so you really have to like really embrace experimentation and trial and error and just be patient with the process.
Yeah, for sure. And that whole framework of like necessity being the mother of all invention, right? Sort of like you need a reason, you need a problem to solve. Like it's fun to play with AI, but when you get down to the problem solving side of things and examining some operational process that you do that you want to either make more automated or more powerful or whatever, and then being able to get from that point A to point B, it's that struggle of like needing a solution that gets you there, right? Even as the person who's like new to AI, you're just kind of like, well, I just need to make it do this. And then you figure that out and you're like, hey, I built something, right? So it's kind of cool. Like anyone can get started doing that sort of workflow. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, believe it or not, we're 29 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
We got a minute left. I think I barely got through all the questions I had for you.
I knew it.
I know you had stuff we wanted to talk about, but
yes.
The way it rolls,
whatever. It's always like,
Hish, I mean, we got a minute left. Is there anything you want to talk about? Did you have any questions for us, or did you I know we were peppering you with things, but and we've talked offline, and I know you've met up with Dave, but anything you want to add or you want to promote or pump out or anything?
Yeah, no, I'm super grateful for you guys inviting me to join you guys on the podcast. It was super interesting to chat with you and hear what's going on. Always keen to chat. If any of the viewers want to reach out and have a conversation, I'm always open to chat. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Hish.
Yeah, thanks for bringing here and coming on and being a guest. We'll make sure we tag you in our stuff so anybody watching knows they can connect with you on LinkedIn. This is being streamed right now on LinkedIn. live, and then we'll have it up on our YouTube channel too. So we'll make sure that you're mentioned there so they can track you down and find you.
Yep.
Cool. Appreciate
Awesome.
that.
Awesome. Well, with that, I want to make sure we're respectful of time. Thank you very much for being here, Hish. David, always a pleasure. Thank you everybody for watching, taking part. Anything interesting, be sure to comment on the video or the post, and don't hesitate to reach out. And we'll see you next week. As I like to always say, same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah,
I'm a bit of a comic book nerd. And
hasta la vista, baby. We always finish with an 80s sort of like 80s tag.
Call out.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Great
guys.
to talk to you today. We'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Send us any comments, questions you guys have. Connect with us. Talk to us.
Yeah, for
See
sure.
you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Later.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.